We all need to work together. Oil and gas, renewables, energy, generations, SMRs, nuclear. If we don't work together, we're not going to achieve where we need to be.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ananja, and you are listening to the Oil and Gas Baking by Show. Today, I'm happy and excited because we'll be joined by Joanna Osawe, President and CEO of Women in Renewable Energy, a leading organization focused on diversity and leadership in energy segment. Joanna has multi-decade experience across renewable project development, business development, and project execution. So today's conversation is about renewable energy, leadership, diversity, and also we talk about the biases that's still holding us back in this energy space. So with that, let's deep dive into Joanna's journey and also get her views about this energy industry. Joanna, thanks for joining me today.
And thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm really looking forward to this podcast.
Thanks for taking your time, Joanna. As I said, you have a very diverse experience, and especially you have spent lots of time promoting renewable energy. So let me start with the renewable energy itself. What has brought you in this renewable energy space?
So when I first started in this space, it was a long time ago. It was as soon as I finished university. And my mom was a microbiologist, and she specialized in microbiology and water pollution specifically. And my father is a mechanical engineer. I was really drawn to the sector. However, I'm not an engineer. And when I got into the renewable space, I started applying for jobs that I had no business applying for, because in every qualification and requirement, I was supposed to meet the professional engineering status, which I did not. It was my unique languages skill that brought me into this sector. And at the time, back in 2002, at that time, it didn't matter whether you're an engineer, a financier, a geologist, an archaeologist, a wind commercial developer. We had no idea what it meant to build wind energy projects. So we were all starting at the same time. And, looking at the market trends back in the 1990s, especially on the Canadian landscape, the activity of the day back in the 1990s was co-generating plants.
Mhm.
Then we moved into 2000, where it became renewables. And then we saw mining took a dip. Then oil and gas went up. So again, it was such an exciting period for me to have started my journey and started learning. And back then, Anand, there's no certification, there's no training, there's no AIs, there's no encyclopedia to tell you how to make and build a wind farm. So that was really the exciting part, of course. And I think that, I saw that energy is not just a technical challenge, but a human and global communication challenge. So I was definitely drawn to the idea of moving the global energy mix forward.
And what was your first role in this industry?
I got hired as a commercial wind developer. And 3 months into it, they said, okay, go build a wind farm. I was really young. I was my early 20s. And I remember heading to New Brunswick and trying to figure out how to get option agreements signed, how to make meetings with landowners, how to even look at contracts, then looking at permitting, environmental assessments. Again, being really integrated into the community, which is extremely important. Working with Indigenous communities is extremely important. It always will be. And then, of course, overseeing the project management, RFPs, and then going into COD. I think that one of the things that I felt throughout my journey was that I was always the only female boots on the ground at the construction sites, and it was not always easy. And on being the only female at the construction sites. My PPE, my arc flash didn't fit.
Yes.
I was mocked. I was demeaned. I was called the wrong title all the time, which
Mhm.
is okay. However, when you're young and you want to make an impression and also make sure that, you're learning through the journey, that was definitely at times there's a lot of obstacles for me. I do often say that, a woman that was only at the construction sites or at the boardroom meetings, it was really getting the steel in the ground, to be honest with you. And now it's more sophisticated, multidisciplinary ecosystem where diversity is recognized as a business imperative, not just a nice to have.
Makes sense. And you talked about those days. I think the energy industry has evolved a lot. Let me ask you a question on your personal journey and also diversity first, and then we go into the industry discussion. So, how do you see the industry has evolved over years as compared to where you have started?
There's still a lot of work to do. As we know, there's a lot of digression right now in the renewable sector and energy sector, in my opinion, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We are going a little bit backwards. The mission for WiRE is to advance a role and recognition of women and underrepresented group in the energy sector. And I'm talking here, and I'm going to talk about, the North American sector and then talk a little bit about the global sector. The North American sector, I am still not seeing enough women in, board of directors positions at the C-suite level, which is very frustrating. I think that we are constantly trying to prove ourselves. We definitely see a lot more women and underrepresented groups in this sector, but it's more through not at the C-suite again. Now, on a global scale, what I see, because we have so many chapters worldwide, you know, women and underrepresented groups have different obstacles and challenges, right? So what's right for WiRE Canada may not be right for WiRE Jordan, WiRE UAE, WiRE
Mhm.
Africa. So I call it GLOCO, be global but act local. There is a big need for us to be working together. If we're going to get to net zero by 2050, we need to be at the table together and not separately looking at the lens.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think the lots of things have been done, but as you said, there is a long way to go. And I think organization like Wire is helping to change this perspective. During your journey, was there any moment that have shaped your or that has shaped your leadership path?
Well, I found, yeah, there's definitely a lot of barriers, that I acknowledge that while progress, as we were talking, has been made, the broken rung still exists, right? The representation isn't just about hiring, it's about retention and creating environments where diverse voices actually influence strategy. I think that, it's important, again, going back to what I said about net zero and getting to 2050, we need to be all hands on deck and not worrying about segregating. We need to work together to make this achievable. I think that working with different platforms at WiRE, I partner with a lot of different organizations, such as skill trades, because we know if we're not working with skill trades, we're not building infrastructure. I have a lot of different partners even with women in nuclear, which we do a lot of work with, which is so important, especially with the SMRs that we're seeing, the small
Uh-huh.
modular reactors. There's a huge lens on Canada and focus on what is happening in our backyard, which I think is really, really exciting. I think that making sure that we're looking at the just transition and really making progress moving forward. Like I said, the broken rungs still exist.
And you talk about the global chapters of Wire. Like, how do you see common approach and different approach across countries and the regions?
So I work very closely with our WiRE chapter leaders in their respective countries to make sure that we understand what their obstacles and how to bring the right programs and initiatives to their countries. I rely on my WiRE chapter leaders and the WiRE volunteers in respective countries to understand that landscape. When I do enter the international markets, WiRE has to be invited. B, I only work with the High Commission of Canada, the Canadian consulates, or the Canadian embassies. I really want to maintain that the WiRE journey is a non for profit that comes and stems from Canada. I think that there's a lot of people that still think that the transition is just about swapping fuels, but it's actually a total infrastructure overhaul. Without transmission lines and grid connectivity, for instance, east to west ties, the greenest energy in the world has nowhere to go.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And so you talk about the different approaches are taken. Let's talk about the industry itself. There are lots of push about renewable few years ago, but the things have changed and things are changing every day. What's your view? Where are we today, and how much progress can we make in next 5 years?
I think it's such an exciting time to be in the energy sector, and pun intended, I feel electrified by it. I think it's such a great industry. I think that for the next 150 years, I don't think any of us have to worry about not having a job. There's so much room for growth. I'm so excited to see, we talked about the small modular reactors, energy storage, battery storage, hydro. And I feel like there's going to be more emerging technologies that we're going to see. What I do want to see is that there's going to be more marriages between technologies. So, for instance, wind and energy storage. And there are actually pilot projects that are happening. So, I'm looking really forward to seeing what the next 5 years And even 2050 to get to that net zero 2050 is going to happen.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think people are putting lots of efforts to reach that goal. But there is another point which we see a lot is about the transition. Like we were very aggressive about this energy transition, and people are saying oil and gas is dead, and let's focus on renewable. But we have seen many examples that didn't work out. So, what's your view? Can all sorts of energy coexist, and what should we do better?
So just because my organization's called Women in Renewable Energy is just because that's where I came from. That's my expertise. I always say that we need to all work together to get to that 2050 goal. Also, to me, my passion is this is not a 9 to 5 job, it's a lifestyle. We all need to work together. Oil and gas, renewables, energy, generations, SMRs, nuclear. If we don't work together, we're not going to achieve where we need to be. Oil and gas is it is a transition. However, we need to support that as well because we can't just omit each other. We need to work together. And again, going back to all hands on deck, right? I feel that whenever I flip the switch on, most people don't think about the safety, reliability, or performance on the grid. And I think that that's really important. I think that we need to educate more people. I mean, we understand within the energy sector what that means. However, we are so lucky here in North America to be able to flip the switch, able to cook, able to wash, right? So I think that sometimes, the public is not aware, and I feel that WiRE needs to also make sure that it's bringing its awareness, education as well.
Makes sense. So when you talk about the renewables, there are lots of perceptions. It could be positive or negative perception, as you know very well. What's often misunderstood about this source of energy?
I think that there's a lot. When I started my career in the renewables, there was a lot of propaganda about whether you can get cancer from wind turbine generator, killing the birds and the bees and the bats, and the worms and the cows and so forth, right? Never end, and even the ecosystem. We did so much environmental assessment preparation to be able to actually build these wind projects. I think that there's more acceptance. I think that there's going to be even more acceptance when I was talking earlier about marrying, energy storage with wind or solar. And I think that coupling these projects together is only going to make it stronger. I also think, I talked about east to west transmissions,
Uh-huh.
right? We need to work together also interprovincially to have that infrastructure. It's great that we have all these projects that we want to build, whether it's the data centers, nuclear, whatever it is. The bottom line is if we don't have infrastructure, we're not interconnecting into the grid, right?
Yes.
So I think that there's some of those challenges still that we need to build out the infrastructure. One of the biggest for me is working with Indigenous communities, not only here on the Canadian side, but on the global side, because it's important to be inclusive, to be working with Indigenous communities. And I really want to see that engagement move forward too on all levels.
Makes sense. And you talk about the challenges. You already highlighted a few of them about the grid connectivity and all those things. But if you have to underline one biggest challenge to promote or to grow this renewable energy, what is that challenge?
Maybe I can just talk about like a little bit about the leadership. I think that today's leader needs to have radical collaboration. It can no longer be siloed expertise. We all need to work together. We all need to understand what each other does. I think that it's ability to bridge a gap between technical teams and local communities, indigenous communities, and stakeholders, of course. And earlier on, I did say I'm not an engineer, and I do often talk about this when I do speaking engagements. And I recommend and I urge everyone, don't wait to check every box on a job. And I always say that I wouldn't be where I am today if I only applied for jobs that were 100% qualified just on paper. I was applying for jobs that I had no business applying for when I was younger. And I have a lot of male champions and sponsors within this industry that have helped me be where I am today as well, which is a very huge, important aspect. Mentorship and sponsorships are very two different definitions. A mentor is there to advise, whereas a sponsor is there to really elevate you and get you to that next level, to that promotion. So I think that, you need to find your sponsors, and then you also need to make sure that you're growing your network. I always say your network is your net worth.
You made really really good point, and you talk about like how much confidence we have so when you're going out, and also network mentoring and the sponsorship is very important if you want to grow in your career, and also if you are the part of any business. I think then that still holds the same value.
Absolutely.
And we talked about a few things here. And one thing, again, going back to the industry, Joanna, like we talk about policy and the business, how they both can intersect to make this transition or transformation of energy successful.
Yeah, policy sets the North Star, but businesses provide the engine. So they must be lockstep to de-risk projects. So that would be the way the policy works. I also think that, there's, we need to also work together with politics, right? And to set those policies, to be able to advise on what those policies look like. And I think that, politics and energy will never divorce. They'll always be intertwined. We all need energy to be able to survive.
Makes sense. And I think also I see the problem came because there was no consistency of policies. So we need a consistent policies to make a difference.
Yes.
So moving forward, Joanna, like what defines leadership in this energy space?
So leadership is about, like I said, I think that everyone has a responsibility to be a leader. A leader is there to listen, to really help their team as well grow. I think that working as a team and not in silos, as I mentioned earlier, is what's really important, right? A true leader is a great listener. A good leader is also one that gives you time and perspective and also bridges those gaps, right? So I talked a little bit about that. I mentioned my male champions that I've had within this industry, and I've had several. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for these amazing men that really helped me grow and lift me up when I needed it. I've also had amazing women that really I could go to and rely as well. And that has been a huge support system for me. I want to give back to the community, hence why WiRE is so important to me. And I think that going back, it's all hands on deck. Like we need to work together to be able to support what is happening worldwide.
Totally agree. And you always need a support to grow. And we already talked about a few things before, from mentoring to sponsorship. But if you go to organization, how they can elevate this leadership discussion and how they can create a good environment for everyone to excel in this energy space.
Well, one must read is the Electricity Human Resources Canada EHRC's Leadership Accord on Gender Diversity. Is a signatory that you definitely, go and sign. But then what they do, what EHRC does, is make sure that they audit you to make sure that you're actually doing the right things, right?
Mhm.
I
Uh-huh.
think that that's one. The Equal by 30, which is by Natural Resources Canada, which is equal pay, equal leadership um, for women by 2030, which is very important as well. Um, so that's definitely for me what I think about leaders is making sure that we're all championing each other. Also, going back, it's I get a lot of students and emerging professionals that are looking for recommendations on where to start, how to get into this. One of the things at WiRE that we do is speed mentorship, which we do at conferences. And at conferences, it's unique because all the decision makers are there. So we bring the decision makers and then we bring the students and emerging leaders, and it's sort of like speed dating, but we're able to get them more involved and get them to understand how to get into the sector, the challenges, the obstacles. And I have to tell you, Anand, that it's a win-win for mentors and mentees because we both learn from each other.
So I fully agree what you just said. It goes both ways. A mentor and mentee, they both learn in this process, and I have done myself, and I saw value. Underlining few things here. If somebody is trying to enter this energy space, what skill and mindset they should have?
Be open because we need to have everybody needs to be included into the energy transition, into this sector. So whether it's communication, marketing, human resources, financing, engineering, I mean, electrical engineer, we all need to, just keep an open mind that there are so many different positions out there within the energy sector, and that you don't need to worry about whether you're a professional engineer or not, that we all need to come together, and there's so many amazing jobs and opportunities out there. Look for mentors. Go to different networking events.
Mhm.
WiRE is a very welcoming community, welcoming organization where we always want to make sure that everyone feels included. And it's great to be able to grow your network because the more you grow your network, the better you're able to understand on what type of jobs there are out there. And I think that now, especially with AI, we're going to see such a huge progress. We don't even know what tomorrow looks like. And I think that that's really exciting as well. However, just keep an open mind that there's so many different positions available out there.
Makes sense. And you talked about the diverse skill set is needed. Either you're in finance or law or AI engineer, there are opportunities for everyone. So if you're interested, like build your network and try to enter this industry because this industry is not going to stop and it will transition, it will transform itself for many decades to come.
Yes.
With that, Joanna, we are also moving to rapid fire round. Are you ready? Okay, let's see how ready are you. Let me start with the question. One myth about renewable energy.
One myth about renewable energy. Well, it doesn't cause cancer. We're not killing the birds and the bees and the cows. Like I said, there's a process for environmental assessments and permitting to get done. So we're making sure that everyone's safe.
Makes sense. Representation in one word.
Representation in one word:
Yes.
leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and working all together.
Makes sense. And leaders can do that if they believe in it. I fully agree. Toughest leadership moment you have ever faced.
There's been several. There's been several occasions. I think one that always stands out to me is when I was early in my career was I didn't have a big voice because I was learning of what building a wind farm was, and I think it was like year 5 or year 6. At the time, my boss was we were going through RFPs. It was RFP season for us, so we were doing a lot of work and a lot of writing. And at the time, my boss yelled at me in front of everyone and said that I was asking stupid questions. That's just
Mhm.
one. Receiving hate letters as well from other individuals because they thought that I was segregating the sexes in the industry was quite impactful. But going back to that first one where I was told that I was asking stupid questions. That actually gave me a voice
Uh-huh.
because I decided from the negative that it was going to be positive and that no one was going to speak to me that way again. And I think that finding your voice is what was, for me, even though a negative experience, but it did become a positive experience in the end.
It all depends on you how you take that experience. So in your case, you turn it into positive learning, and that stayed with you for a long time. Makes sense. Let's move on. A habit that keeps you effective.
Well, I love to travel and I love to network and learn. And I think that that's what's important is always learning because if you're not learning, you're not really breaking the barriers and understanding. So I love to talk shop a lot within even at home with my husband. We're very much aligned when it comes to the energy sector. So it's really important that we carry the conversation with each other and learn again, not being in silos and learning from each other. What does a design engineer do? What does a business development person do? What does a transmission, you know, QA/QC do? So I think that it's important to continue to understand what each other does because sometimes those silos, sometimes those silos need to be broken.
Makes sense. And best advice you have ever received early in your career.
Don't check boxes.
I like that one because most of us we like to check boxes on both sides, like as an applicant or also as a hiring manager, and we have seen that. So biggest mistake young professionals make.
Biggest that they don't network enough that they don't go out to events. At WiRE, we provide we do events for networking. So we have different panels. We have a student table that is organized at the Ontario Energy Network with the sponsorship of the ISO. So that's a great opportunity for students to and come to these luncheons, listen to these C-suite folks, network again. Field trips are really, really important because most people don't know the difference between a transmission line versus a distribution line, right? Even recently, we went on a tour to the ISO, to their control room, which is super
Mhm.
cool. Looks like
Mhm.
the Matrix. Last week, we had the pleasure of doing a field trip with the Port of Beldoon out of New Brunswick. Not only did we tour, the port, but there is shipments of the wind turbine generators coming off the boats, which was really neat to see. Um, I think that that provides again that awareness and education. So I tell students, not only students, but the general public to get interested.
Makes sense. And you talked about using those opportunities to learn more and to make yourself familiar about this industry itself. Last not the least, complete this sentence. The future of energy belongs to the people who.
Who are trying to make things happen and moving the dial.
Yes, I fully agree because somebody has to own something to make a difference, and I think what you just said, I fully agree with it. Okay, let's move on. No, that's really great, Joanna. We learn a lot of things about you and the industry itself. But at the end, I will say, if somebody listened to this conversation after 5 years, what should they come to know about renewable energy and leadership in the energy sector?
Well, if someone listens to this in 2031, I hope that they find the phrase breaking bias a bit dated because by then, inclusive leadership should just be leadership. So I
Hmm.
want them to see that representation wasn't just a moral goal, um, but the literal fuel that allowed us to solve the climate crisis and build a more resilient and reliable grid.
Makes sense. I think hopefully in 5 years things will change, and also things can change fast, as we have seen many times if there is a consistency in the policy. So if there is consistent policy, business needs consistency, and you will see better outcomes in going forward. That's really great, Joanna. But before I sign off, anything to add here?
Thank you so much, Anan, for doing this. I'm really happy that we got to connect. It's really nice to see you again. I wish you always the very best. And WIRE is always here to support and assist in any way.
And that's excellent. So thank you very much. If this conversation challenge your thinking about renewable energy and the leadership, please share your comments. And with that, we will keep breaking bias with one conversation at a time. Keep listening, Oil and Gas Breaking Bias Show. Have a great day. Thank you.